Hey folks, about a week ago I received a DM from a user called Incylist asking me if I would be interested in having a little competition, the £50 Gaming PC Challenge. Now, as you know from this channel, I love older tech. The value it represents always blows me away, but £50? I mean £10 less than I stupidly paid for No Man's Sky on PS4 last year? That was going to be interesting, and it's something that I just couldn't turn down. When undertaking a project like this, the first thing you need to do is decide on the criteria that you want to hit. So I settled on a few must-haves: a decent PSU, at least 4GB of RAM, and some sort of quad-core processor. Now, from time to time, I'll buy and repurpose older office components for family and friends who want something basic and cheap, and that's where I started my search this time. After searching through the papers, I eventually found a relatively local seller who was looking to sell an old HP desktop for £40. The PC was an old workstation, and after some gentle persuasion, he settled on £30. This old workhorse was fitted with an HP proprietary motherboard, a 365W PSU, an Intel Q6600 quad-core CPU, 200GB of storage, 6GB of DDR2 Ram, and it came with a fresh install of Windows 7. Booting up the PC when I got home, it turned out it was perfectly serviceable. The owner had cleaned out all the dust from the case, and apart from a rat's nest of cabling, everything was in fairly good fettle. Once everything had a bit of a look over, I started the arduous task of updating Windows 7, and let that run overnight while I started hunting down a suitable GPU. After losing out on so many HD 5000 and 6000 series cards, an offer of £15 was accepted for an Nvidia GTS 450. This and a few pounds for some extra cabling that I needed to actually get this thing to work with the HP proprietary layout meant that I was just under the £50 budget that would set. With the books now balanced, the card was refurbished and installed in the machine with the latest supported drivers available, and then the benchmarking began. First up was Crysis 3. Now, having already tried out this GTS 450 on my own gaming rig, I knew that performance wasn't exactly going to be stellar. In the modern Core i5 system with nearly twice the amount of VRAM, it easily hit over 30fps at medium settings, with a few fancy post-processing effects thrown in for good measure. On this £50 rig, however, we needed to make a few more compromises. I settled on a resolution of 900p with everything on the low spec apart from the texture detail, which we could bump up to medium with no real adverse effects. On top of that, the GTS 450 allowed us to run FXAA and 2x anisotropic filtering. This helped clean the game up quite a good bit, and we averaged at 36fps over the first two chapters. The frame rate, however, it was a little bit variable, with the Q6600 struggling at times, meaning infrequent but sometimes noticeable drops to the low 20s in frame rate. Next up was Fallout 4. Overall, this gave us a pretty decent showing for an old card and CPU. The game was entirely playable at 900p and on the low preset, and it was as engrossing as ever, with average 34fps. Heading into a crowded area like Diamond City obviously pushed that frame rate just below the 30fps mark, but overall it was pretty impressive, and it actually coped better than I was expecting. Playing Battlefield 1 on this £50 PC was quite interesting. I mean, it's a game that favours heavily multi-threaded CPUs. But with this £50 system, I'll say that I was pleasantly surprised. The warning signs were there when you boot it up, the load times are way too long, and even when you get into a game you've got to wait for 15 to 20 seconds while things start popping in and populating. But once everything's in, it does hop along nicely, about 32-33fps at 900p on low settings. The lowest frame rates though were perhaps a bit too low for it to be called playable. Seeing that the heart of the system is 10 years old, however, we can kinda expect that. Finally, we've got GTA 5. Now, GTA 5 is generally really well optimised. After all, I mean, it was released on the PS3 and Xbox 360, but it can still prove to be a challenge on lower end hardware, and this £50 PC definitely constitutes lower end hardware. But by steering clear of 1080p and keeping the detail settings to normal with no real fancy effects, we managed to average a frame rate of about 35fps. Severe dips in frame rate were generally limited to when I was really trying to push it, and in particular in this game, I think the 6GB of RAM in the system really helped keep that frame rate above 30. Now, I know a lot of you guys is going to be severely unimpressed by these lower resolutions and console-like frame rates, but let's put this into perspective. For £50 you can play some of the latest games. For less than I've spent on braided cabling and fans, you can build a computer. And for less than a PS4 launch copy of No Man's Sky, you can build a gaming PC and you've got some spare change to spend on a Steam sale. And that prospect alone, it really opens many doors for you. This particular PC is a one-trick pony. There are a few issues that I'm going to cover in another video, but as a stepping stone for entering into that haloed PCMR, you can learn so much by undertaking a project like this, and with such a low cost of entry. Should you decide that PC gaming is just not for you, then by selling the components separately, you're pretty much guaranteed to get your money back. Anyway folks, I hope you enjoyed this video as much as I enjoyed bringing this bargain bucket to life. Remember to use those thumbs to tell me what you thought, and hitting that subscribe button if you've not done so already. Also, big thanks to Incylist for suggesting this build in the first place. It's been really good fun, and be sure to check out what he managed to do with his £50 in the link in the description. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you again next time.